Welcome to the latest Evershed Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.
Hello, I'm Matthew Allen, Global Head of Financial Services at Evershed Sutherland. Welcome to the latest in a series of podcasts exploring trends and opportunities in global financial markets in 2025. Each month, we'll be hearing from our clients on a particular hot topic issue, which our own subject matter experts on both sides of the Atlantic will then reflect upon in a separate podcast. Today, we'll be looking at the issue of emerging tech and in particular the renewed focus on digital assets. To help us do this, I'm delighted to be joined by Azmina Keshani, Chief Legal Officer at Zodia Custody, one of the world's leading institutional digital asset custody providers. Azmina, welcome. It's great to have you with us today. Maybe you could start by telling everyone a little bit about you and your personal background and your roles and responsibilities at Zodia.
Hello, Matthew. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I appreciate the invitation. My name is Azmina, and I am a custody lawyer of many years. My background is mainly in the financial institutions. So I've worked across many of the big custodians globally, so HSBC, Standard Chartered. I've also spent some time at Citibank. And most of my career, I've been what's called a product lawyer. So ideating, creating, and delivering product to market. Mostly that's been creating regulated custodians. So I've created and worked with the business on creating custodians in jurisdictions globally. So in Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United States. So more recently, at Standard Chartered Bank, I was asked after I joined to help with the design and creation of Zodia Custody, which was an exciting and an amazing opportunity. So that's sort of pretty much my background.
And tell us a little bit then about what Zodia Custody does.
Yeah, so Zodia Custody does much what a custodian does. So we keep assets safe. That's our primary role. And this is the cryptocurrency market, so not securities, but cryptocurrencies and or stable coins, depending on the jurisdiction. So we operate in a number of jurisdictions where we provide that service. And we do offer some ancillary services around that, such as staking support and some account control type functionality, which we offer to a number of our sort of prime brokerage type clients.
And then just looking at the market, more generally, it's been quite a journey the last few years. We've had a sort of a gold rush boom, in crypto, and then, the crypto winter and, things like the FTX blow up and all of these things. And now, of course, we've got a new administration in the US, which is seemingly extremely crypto friendly. We've got a task force at the SEC, I guess, who are looking at how the whole platform in the US can be improved and made more crypto friendly. We've got the European MiCA legislation, which is up and running. The UK kind of hanging sort of in the middle. I mean, how do you see the digital asset market developing against that backdrop in the coming period?
Yeah, well, Matthew, I think that's really exciting, isn't it? So, having been in this field for a little while, I've been championing regulation or rules. With rules and regulation comes certainty, and so the markets develop and grow quicker. And so MiCA has done a really good job of setting a benchmark. I think there's some work to go there to ensure that the rules allow the market to accelerate. And I think that the US is doing a fantastic job. I mean, I think it's always been challenging with the US with the federal laws. So bringing about federal legislation is really going to make a huge difference in the US. And we're going to see, I think, the markets accelerate in a way that perhaps we haven't seen before. And I think that's going to encourage other markets to develop their regulation in a way that would help help the markets grow as well. So I think we saw in Hong Kong just 2 days ago some announcements from the SFC, what they're doing in terms of creating better support for custody regulation. which they hadn't done previously. So we're really excited about that. And of course, you've got the PSA regulations in Singapore, which came in some time ago, and we're starting to see a change in that market that's helping and developing the growth of the digital asset markets.
And that point about regulation, there's always that balance between, I mean, I think you just described it in a way that, it can facilitate or foster innovation, but how do you strike the right balance between regulation that enables and obviously regulation which I guess most people wouldn't want, which potentially chokes off innovation?
So there has to be some balance, I think, in the way regulation is drafted. So there's got to be some things that are principles based and some things that are kind of hard rules. So one of the things I think that's quite challenging for all of the jurisdictions in terms of regulation is, what does reconciliation mean? And I think if you are too prescriptive on what reconciliation is, you're going to hamstring innovation, because that can mean very different things in very different places depending on where you're coming from. And especially with the blockchain, the assets should be very clear on the blockchain. It's the record of choice. But we have seen that in some jurisdictions where they said you've got to reconcile, and the question is, reconcile against what, right? So there's got to be some principles-based approach and a continuous dialogue with the regulators to allow innovation to continue. And I would say, the regulators in the UAE are probably one of the most forward thinking in that, because there is a regular dialogue and you can have those discussions with them. So I think that kind of approach is really important.
And I think that's absolutely right, and it's interesting to see how all the different regulators are approaching this. Um, I guess one question is around, digital asset innovation more generally. Obviously, crypto gets all of the headlines. There is a lot of activity out there, in terms of trying to do things that are very innovative, attaching illiquid assets to the blockchain and creating liquidity where and tradability where there might not be at the current time. How do you see this sort of developing, or this new environment supporting that wider digital asset innovation beyond crypto?
I mean, we've seen some very interesting deals coming across our desks, and we're seeing how we can support those. I think tokenization, but not necessarily. I'm not sure if tokenization is necessarily the right word for them, but we do see, art and coming across our desks, um, jewels, gold, those kind of a liquid assets, which I think, there's a huge market for it in order to create liquidity. And I think the quicker, and there is a bit of an issue with how you custody that. It's not really quite straightforward at the moment. So there is a bit of work to be done by all of the innovative providers in the market, as well as the regulators, to make sure there's a space for that.
And then just going back to the regulatory regime, and just sort of again the journey that I guess the market has been on, and there have been concerns around financial crime and around market stability and some of these issues. What are the things that the industry really needs to sort of get out in front of and assure both regulators but also would be users of this market that they're on top of to ensure that there is growth in the way that you anticipate?
So I think, the monitoring of assets on the chain and all that financial crime and KYC, I would say it's even more detailed than in the conventional markets, because everything's on the blockchain. So if you have the right tooling, you can monitor, what's happening with the assets. Um, if you have appropriate KYC, which most entities are required to do, and you marry the two together, you have a pretty good system there. I don't. I mean, maybe I'm a bit too optimistic, but I think that the technology that we have generally across the market in this area is pretty good. So I don't really see for myself anything that we need to get out ahead of in relation to that particular aspect. I think we're there.
Yeah, and look, I think what we see, and I'm sure you're seeing it as well, is that there is this huge kind of interest in increased curiosity, maybe in terms of what lies ahead, and a willingness to become more exposed into this area. So, with that in mind, there are institutions out there that are looking to deepen their exposure to digital assets in the coming period. Have you got, what are your top tips for them?
Well, I think, I mean, look, Standard Chartered research came out this week or last week. I saw in the press that, they're sort of guesstimating that Bitcoin is going to be, I don't know, I think I saw 500,000, but I just couldn't believe it. Maybe it was 200,000. So I think we've seen this market going one way. When you have something like an FTX, there's a blip, but after the blip, the markets rally and we go back to the direction of travel, which is this is seen as a safe asset class to invest in. So generally speaking, I think that is the direction of travel. You're seeing pension funds, which arguably are the most conservative investors, are gaining exposure to digital asset markets. So I think it's sort of sensible to assume that most people should be having some kind of a digital asset in their portfolio.
Azmina, thank you very much for joining us today. There's a huge amount more we could talk about, but I'm going to have to tie it up there, I think. Thanks again for joining us and for your really helpful insights. And of course, thanks to you, the listeners, for joining us as always. If you would like to know more about how Zodia Custody can help your business, I'm sure Azmina and her colleagues would be delighted to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to get in touch and we can pass on contact details if needed. Please look out for the next podcast in this series with Evershed Sutherland Partners, reflecting on what Azmina has shared with us today. And that will appear on all our usual social media channels in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Evershed Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.